because we're out walking around in our yard looking at the frost pattern. Two Japanese maples, not even 20 feet apart from each other. And one of them in the foreground got zapped by the frost and one didn't, all because of chimneys in a treed yard. Even if you've got your trees, and they're very big trees in Dennis's yard, limbed up high, so you've got a real high canopy, there are those branches in the wintertime and in the late winter and early spring are re-radiating heat that's coming out of the ground. It's always coming out of the ground. There's lava down there someplace. The ground is always radiating heat. Some of it hits those branches, warms up the branches, and they radiate back down. But where there are no branches or not enough branches above, it becomes a chimney, and the warm air gets through there faster and starts, it creates drafts. It pulls cold air behind it. So this time of year when there's frost, and we couldn't find a picture, Steve said, I've got lots of ice pictures. I've got lots of frost on the window pictures, but what you need to do is look at a new
wanted picture on the list.
Yes. When you look out one morning and go, wow, look, there was a frost overnight. Look for the places in a yard with trees. Look for the places where there is frost versus where there isn't frost. Because plants like peonies that get peony botrytis, or people say, oh, they don't bloom well for me, are often being hit by a late spring frost, and you might be able to move them 10 feet.
That could even apply to some of these hydrangeas that everybody complains about. They're there could be hydrangea, that those blue and pink hydrangeas could be that far apart, and those buds are what got killed.
Yeah, that happened to us in a client's yard where she had blue hydrangeas blooming all along the foundation of the house. I said, oh, great, you can grow blue hydrangeas. So let's move one of them. There's plenty of them here. Let's move one of them out there in the garden. I moved it 30 feet away and it wouldn't bloom. I said, well, that's just because I just moved it. The next year it did bloom. And I went, okay. So I moved it back in and it began blooming again. Because there was
microclimates.
Yeah. And that we wrote about because that was a particularly bad year. That was 2012. We had an incredibly hard late frost. And we wrote about it, gave people a whole rundown that in March, there was a frost that ended the early stuff because it had warmed up so much at the very beginning of March. And then it really slammed in April. So we've got articles written about that. And while we were talking about damage, our friend Keith sent us a picture. He said, okay, so well, he didn't send the picture first. First, he said, so the neighbor's tree fell down and knocked down my bayberry. And I went, what bayberry? What bayberry have you got? I thought, are you talking about the arborvitae that fell down? I said, and he said, well, my landscaper is recommending that I put in a double file viburnum. And me thinking it was the arborvitae area, went, oh, way too big a plant. But he said, I'm not familiar with it. Tell me about it. This is one of our favorite plants of all time.
And there's a lot of different varieties, Shasta, Mauritii, and lots now.
Snowflake,
some smaller, some bigger, but the branching habit, the flowering, the way that the leaves are color up, it's in the right place. It's a spectacular plant.
And they call it wedding cake shrub in England, and some of the people that I talked to. It's viburnum, plicatum, tomentosum, and this one, the one that we told Keith to make sure he gets is Shasta. Marie's double file, Mauritii, is not reliably hardy for us, especially in the late winter. We keep getting dead branches dying back unless it's very, very well sheltered. But it's wedding cake shrub for being so layered and so white, and it looks like it has frosting on the branches.
And it's called double file because they're arranged in a double file along the stem. The buds, the flower, the fruit.
Yeah, there's a row going down either side of the stem, the left and the right side of every stem. And you'll get fruit lining those branches. It's done blooming here if you've got another viburnum or two around,
and not necessarily just the plicatum. You need a viburnum in bloom,
right? That
blooms the same time
because they need to cross pollinate to get good fruit set. But boy, when you get one that's got red berries all along those branches in a double row,
and it's got the red on the pedicels.
Peduncles. Yeah, and it turns a nice color in the fall. So we told him, go ahead, tell him to put in a double file viburnum if you can find a Shasta for you, but not if it's where the arborvitae goes, because man, they get big. There's three. They're planted staggered, one forward, one back, one forward. But look at the height on those guys. Not the place that you want. Not a plant you want to put.
They are anywhere. A big plant. Don't kid yourself. Even the Shasta that's supposed to be a little bit smaller is still going to be a big plant.
And it's been a mild winter, so maybe the doublefile viburnums will bloom well. But when it's a mild winter, if you're out there looking at frost, etc., it's probably a mole year too, because the moles were able to dig all the way up for quite a long time. And we talked last week about mole traps, and someone wrote and said, "What are you talking about, a mole trap?" This is a mole killer, is what it is. You dug a hole in the place where the run is, so the run was going across the step here at our client's garden. Was going right across the step.
That way.
And so I took a spade and took out a chunk of the soil, cleared away the soil until I could tell that, yes, there's the run. I can feel a hole going to the left and a hole going to the right, set the trap down in it, pulled the trigger up. It's really hard to pull. It's a strong spring because it really comes down with great force, and then pile the soil back in again. Or you can take a piece of sod and just cover the whole thing up. What happens is the mole comes through to clear out. He's just busily clearing out the soil, and he triggers that trap, and the harpoon tines come down and kill him. So if you see that it's been triggered, then you can take it out. Generally, there's only one mole in a yard, but there might be it's late in April, there might be a couple because they've mated. But that's what a mole trap is. And I know they're awful, but if they're making it unsafe for you to walk in your garden, as they were for my client in her garden, if the ground was that unsteady, then you better do something about it.
And in our opinion, it's still better than chemicals.
Yeah. We do know someone though who would go out at night. She was very, very much against using these. She would go out at night and steal neighbors' mole traps. I was out with her in her shed one day and saw that there were 15 mole traps out there, or close to 15. I said, "Oh, I didn't think that this would," and that's when she told me. She said, "Well, actually, I've been taking them."
Not good.
So we wrote about this in what's coming up 134, and it would be in this time of year. So if you opened up late winter, you'd find an article about moles that has that picture in it, and also deer. We've got netting over the shrubs that the deer were munching on that year. And while you're out there looking around and look at what the buds are telling you. People say my forsythia doesn't bloom. I think the buds got, I think I pruned it wrong. Okay, this is a forsythia pruned 2 inches, maybe 4 inches deep against the wall, pruned repeatedly through the year, starting in April, and then pruned to keep it there. And look at that branch. That is loaded with buds. If it was just leaf on that forsythia, there would be 1 bud on each side of the stem, not groups of 2 and 3 buds. It's going to bloom wonderfully because it's a hardy forsythia, or it's in a good place. There is a famous old forsythia called Linwood Gold that is not reliably hardy if you're in a true zone 5. And it will every year keep the leaf buds alive, and the flower buds will get killed.
Yep.
So take a look and see if it's going to bloom. You can tell if your red bud's going to bloom too when you look at it like that. Another break to see if there's any questions here.
Yeah, there are a few, although Squeaks had just dropped in. Brookstone has a sonic mold trap, and I've Googled it. They're like vibrasonic mold chaser from Amazon. They're spikes that emit a low frequency, and it looks like some of them are solar powered on top. Have you heard of these or tried these at all?
Yeah, there were battery operated ones years ago when we were first running into moles in people's gardens. And I especially in a big yard, maybe in a little city lot, just like the gopher plant. What is gopher plant? It's a euphorbia. There's a euphorbia that the moles do not like the scent of, and castor bean plant they don't like the scent of. If you planted a hedge of those around your yard, you might be able to keep out the moles. And so I think in a big yard, I don't think they're practical. We didn't see any real improvement with spending money on the battery operated ones and using them.
But it also is one of those things that, you know, the repercussions wouldn't be like trying chemicals, and you wouldn't have to face the harpooning.
That would rank that chemicals are last on our list of control methods.
Yeah, and people tell us, one of our questioners this week said, I don't want to use pesticides. I might want to point out that harpoon trap is a pesticide. If it kills a pest, it is a pesticide. If you squash it, you're a pesticide. The pesticides that we object to are the chemicals that are broad spectrum that kill a lot of things, and especially the things that kill by neurological activity. My only risk factor that fits for me for Parkinson's is herbicide exposure. And we looked at each other and went, yep. You crawl on treated lawns for 40 years. and you get exposed to chemicals, and that's probably what it is. We object to those things because if they affect something with the nervous system, although it's an insect in a different animal group than we are, what's it doing to us? We don't really know about those things, so we don't.
And poison, moles, mice, everything can get eaten by other things.
Yeah.
And pass the poison on.
It's got a broad activity. And these are all.
We have a follow-up from Stacy about any suggestion to get rid of woodchucks, and all I can think of is my father-in-law trying to relocate his woodchuck and ended up spray painting its butt blue to confirm that, yep, same woodchuck just kept coming back to the yard no matter how far I drove. So the woodchuck dealings are sagas in the in our experience.
Yes, we have seen many woodchucks that become members of the family.
They can do a lot of damage in certain areas around decks, and that one of our clients allowed them to get too close to his deck, and then 2 years later his deck is collapsing.
We've talked to people who've done the thing where they find the groundhog's holes and they stuff them full of mothballs or other kitty litter. I can't remember all the things people have put down there, and they said that worked. I think all that does is move the groundhog a little ways away, but they still come foraging where you've got the food for them. And I just can't stand the thought of killing things. We took one groundhog out that we trapped in a client's yard and it's in a live trap, and now I'm going to take it out. And you could tell it was terrified. It was terrified of the ride. It was terrified when I let it go. And I'm not letting it go in a place where there's not other groundhogs and things living already. So
it's tough.
Yeah.